Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, classmates. I am Johanna Sisaban, the first reporter of Group 3 under the Module 3 Barriers of Effective Communication and Listening Process. Introduction. In this module, we'll discuss the different barriers of communication and the listening process that will help the students easily identify the barriers that they could encounter in the future. Objectives. At the end of this module, students are expected to A. Identify the different barriers of communication, and B. Enumerate their own listening process and apply the provided listening process. What is barriers? Barriers was the obstacle that intends message of the sender is not understood exactly by the receiver. It means if you are a sender or a speaker and you intend to pass the message on to the listener, but he or she did not understand it well because of the hindrances in the flow of communication. For example, when one groups are not able to understand or get the message directly that transported by another groups, there is a possibility that this may lead them to misunderstandings or cause communication breakdown. Mindsets. When you enter into a communication situation, you bring with you your beliefs, principles, attitudes, prejudices, and experiences. If, as you communicate, any of these interfere with what you hear, you might not be able to decode correctly what the speaker tells you. Every time you communicate to someone, or in the classrooms, outside of the schools, countries, the beliefs, principles, attitudes, prejudices, and experiences are always been there. For example, you are giving a chance to deliver a speech in front of a lot of people. You need to know how to control your emotions, because if your delivering of a speech is mad, there's a tendency that your listener could misunderstood what you're going to deliver, and it causes a conflict both the speaker and the listeners. Distractions. Distractions such as noise can also be barriers to effective communications. Noise may be defined as anything that interferes with communication. Being distracted can also cause some hindrance between the sender and the receiver. Like for example, the sender or speaker was trying to speak in front and there is a boy at the back who makes some noise and he gets the attention of others instead of listening to the speaker. Therefore, the listener can't probably comprehend what the speaker said. We have several types of noise, such as physical noise, physiological noise, psychological noise, and semantic noise. Physical noise are the result of surroundings that is physical environment. It's either a climate or weather and time and distance between the sender and the receiver of the message and disturbance of communication, noise, and etc. Physiological noise. These barriers arise out of physical state of a sender or a receiver, which includes the physical inability who sends the message communicated by another party. The disabilities include poor vision, poor memory, and hearing disabilities. Psychological noise. It draws your attention away from the speaker or message. All the barriers related to psychological of a person, for examples are attitudes, point of view, perception, emotions, and state of consciousness and opinion. Semantic noise is the interference during the construction of a message, also known as linguistic barriers, often lead lacks misunderstandings between the sender and the receiver due to a meaning of words and symbols that use in the process of communication. It occurs of a recipient or recipients have a very limited language or do not have a good knowledge about the use of words. It takes place by the unfamiliar expressions during the process of communication. How can these barriers be overcome? First, you should never lose sight of your purpose in communicating to it, to provide information, to establish better relationships, to effect manage others, to be your listeners. Whatever your purpose is, you should be objective and sincere. To overcome the hindrance between the sender and the receiver is that when we are going to eye contact with the speaker. In this way, we can establish a good relationship between the listener and the sender, and with the eye-to-eye contact, we can get easily the information that they delivered. Second, in any speaking situation, you must observe the basic principles in the use of language. Greece, 1975-1978, identified these basic principles and named them as maxims of conversation. It means that the maxim of conversation identified the basic principles in 1975 and 1978, and this will be the ways or guide of how to deliver a message correctly. A. Maxim of quality: what you say must be true and supported by adequate evidences. So, when we are going to deliver a message, we need to be honest or true to what we are delivering. If ever we have a sources or cites some evidences that the receiver or listener should believe in you. B. Maxim of quantity: what you say must be informative. If we delivered a message, it is very necessary to provide some information. Like for example, when we are going to report something, which is we have to give some complete information, because if not, our listener will leave them hanging and they can't understand what you're going to say. C. Maxim of relevance: what you say is relevant to what is being discussed or what needs to be discussed. Being relevant or reliability to whom we delivered a message, it is the saying or saying that happens to what you say that can also be related to what is to be talked about or what should be talked about. D. Maxim of manner: what you say is organized and clear. For example, you are giving a chance to speak in front of the audience or a listener. It is very important on delivering a speech are clear and organized para ang ating tagapakinig ay hindi malito sa ating nais na sabihin. We have common barriers to effective communication. First, the use of jargon. It is an unfamiliar word that only the professionals could understand the meaning of words. For example, a wool is from military use to describe person. A wool means absent without leave. Second is emotional barriers and taboos. In emotional barriers, and it is forbidden the stage of situation where it affects our thinking, a mental limitation that prevents us from communicating or expressing ourselves. This is the situation where some people find it difficult to express their feelings. So they find it difficult to express feelings at the same time. It is because the subject is completely out of bounds or difficult to understand topics. For example, politics, religion, disability, mental and physical, sexuality and gender, racism, and the opinion that is unnecessary or seen as unpopular. Third, lack of attention, interest, distractions, or irrelevance to the receiver. When communicating with someone, you don't need to apply this kind of lackings. Also, before you speak, think first if you're interested to your speech. Fourth, differences in perception and viewpoint. It is based on your own perspective or how you interpret the situation, while the viewpoint are based on what you see or how you view yourself, others, and everything else around you. Cultural differences. It is the contrast between communication, exchanging information with each other. Also, it diverses the communication hard because of people from different cultures that have diverse behaviors, language, signs, and expression. Like for example, the concept of personal may varies between culture and different social settings. 6. Physical disabilities such as hearing problems or speech difficulties. In this situation, there are some people who have a problem or disabilities like they can't hear and talk. so that in this stage we can use a nonverbal cues to explain them or to communicate them, and with the help of hand gestures, expressions, and body movements, they can understand what we wanted to say or to deliver. 7. Physical barriers to nonverbal communication. It includes a person's expressions such as hand gestures, body movements, and others that we express when we do not speak or no sounds happens, and with the help of physical movement, our body, hands, expression, and so on to deliver properly the message or sender that he wanted to say. 8. Language differences in the difficulty in understanding unfamiliar accents. When you communicate with someone, then there are some people who are very professional when it comes to communicating. Then, that language or words, there's a possibility that he or she can say unfamiliar words. Because of that, there are barriers or misunderstanding in their conversation. Also, it can cause a communication breakdown. And lastly, expectations and prejudices which may lead to false assumptions or stereotyping. People often hear what they expect to hear rather than what is actually said and jump into incorrect conclusions. For example, you may assume that because people are nodding while you speak as if they understand and agree with what you are saying. According to Rafaela H. Diaz, behind communication process are several factors that inevitably spur bottlenecks in the way of efficient message sending and receiving. Commonly felt as barriers, these obstacles concerning language use, the people involved, the environment, and those of the immediate situation can obstruct the meaning and cause communication breakdown. According to her, the communication process have a several factors that we cannot avoid to motivate the way of mannerly of sending and receiving of a message. Also, it commonly cause of hindrance by using language. We people are involved into the situation that possible cause of a communication breakdown. Elements of communication cannot be safe or ensure, and they can also cause a barriers either for the sender and the receiver. For example, in your physical appearances, your voice, style, sounds, and it includes your ways of mannerisms, and all nonverbal aspects can affect the listeners. The message. In this stage, it is required to clarify the concreteness, conciseness, and coherence, which means that there is a possibility that the process of communication must be delayed. However, it is more likely as choosing of channels it is needed for an attention of how the message is urgent and who are going to receive it. The choice of channel. In choosing of channel that we're going to use is that appropriate to the time required for the message. Especially, it is necessary to the listener to have an effective and ineffective communication. Also, the listener or receiver may not be able in the position to listen, or she may have a disability of listening process. Feedback is the most important part of every communication process. Communication is seek to be meaningful and effective when the feedback is received at the end of the process and as it was effective. In addition, barriers classified as personal, interpersonal, perceptual, environmental, physical, organizational, temporal, semantic, channel or media related, and geographical in nature are the steps or guide to find ways on how the process of communication works, so that we communicators should be aware and know what are we going to avoid, control, and minimize as long as your delivering of words are effective to the both sender and the receiver.
Good day, ma'am and classmates. I am Dilabakin Rakmaem, Group 2. So, here are several ways that can help improve communication. Ito yung way na makaka-improve ng communication ng skills mo. So, number 1, Plan your communication, consult with others where appropriate. So, kumbaga, kumonsulta ka sa iba kung totoo ba yung nakuha nilang information. Like, halimbawa, kung ano yung narinig mo sa balita is, kumonsulta ka muna kung totoo yun. Number 2, be a good listener. Give the speaker undivided attention. So, halimbawa, kapag may nagsasalita sa harap, is pakinggan mo yun ang mabuti. Number 3, communicate for tomorrow as for today. Importance of listening. To effect success, interaction to share equal responsibility in achieving effective communication. So, para epektibo yung pag-interact mo sa ibang tao, kapag mag-share ka ng information is dapat equal, pantay-pantay, and dapat alam mo yung responsibilidad mo as achieving effective communication. As a receiver of the message must realize how important listening is. So, as a receiver, kapag ikaw ay makakatanggap ng mensahe, kailangan ma-realize mo kung gaano importante yung nakuha mo or napakinggan mong balita. Kasi yun na nga, 'di ba, kapag may narinig kang, halimbawa if reporter ka, dapat masabi mong totoong information kasi responsibilidad mo na sabihin yung totoo. And whatever purpose you have say, you listen to follow the direction. To obtain knowledge, to arrive at decisions, to evaluate information, to show appreciation, and you must understand that listening plays a very important role to effect purposeful interaction. And para ma-evaluate mo yung information, kailangan magpakita ka rin ng appreciation and kailangan maintindihan mo yung listening plays a very important role to effect purposeful interaction. So, alam mo yung purpose kung bakit mo yung ginawa or bakit mo yun siya sinabi. Kind of listening. We listen to music to be entertained. We listen to homilies. We listen to teachers, resource speakers, or newscasters to be informed. These kinds of listening are easy, but there are more difficult kinds of listening. Kinds of listening. According to McBurney and Wright, the best kind of listening has the following characteristics. So, the best kind of listening has the following characteristics. Ito yung pinaka-best kind ng characteristic. Number 1, voluntary. Good listening begins with a willingness to panic completely in a communicative situation. So, diba kapag nakikinig ng maayos, makakasagot ka ng mabuti, yun ang ginamin niya sa voluntary. Number 2, purposeful. You choose to listen because of some very good reason. So, purposely, halimbawa sa isang symposium, bakit ka pumunta doon? Kasi you have a reason na kung bakit ka pumunta doon, kasi gusto mong makakuha ng knowledge. So, motivated. Motivated, when you have good reason for listening, you are all geared up for the activity and nothing can stop you. So, kapag motivate ka or yun na nga, you have a good reason for listening, hindi kapag interesado ka sa bagay na yun, is talagang kakapit yung tainga mo doon sa nagsasalita sa harap mo. Requisite to good listening is a purpose. So, when you say requisite to good listening is a purpose, ito yung halimbawa ng kind of listening. Yung voluntary, purposeful, and motivated. To obtain information and gain knowledge, you listen to and benefit from the experience of others. Understanding and retention are the primary goals. To appreciate and enjoy what is said, you are pleased with what you hear. The listening process. The process of listening is made up of 4 stages. They are as follows. The physical or attention stage. Listening begins with the ability to hear or to catch sounds with the use of the auditory system. So, halimbawa doon sa pagkikinig is nagsisimula sa abilidad mong makinig or paano mo nakakatch yung sinasabi nung nagbibigay ng information or like explain. With use of the auditory system, a person must therefore be in the position or right mood to listen. So, dapat kapag nakikinig is nasa position or right mood ka, dapat nasa mood ka kasi minsan kapag wala ka sa mood, walang pumapasok sa isipan mo. He must be ready to listen. So, dapat ready ka makinig. He must be free from distractions. Dapat kapag may nagsasalita, walang maingay-ingay kasi nadidistract ka. Yung nagsasalita sa kabila or yung nag-iingay. The sitting must likewise. So kapag nakapag-concentration ka sa isang bagay or nakapokus ka doon sa nagsasalita, ikaw ay nakikinig is mai-expect mo talaga na good listener ka kasi marami kang naririnig. So that's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon to each and everyone, especially to you, ma'am. I'm Asmin Dirampatin and I am the last reporter of this Module 3. So now I will continue the discussion of Miss Rakma Dilabaken. So, types of listening. The communication situation we engage in every now in the vary. Each type of situations calls for different levels of listening. So, they are the different types of listening. Number 1. Active listening as contrasted to passive listening. The former, which is a skill, requires effort on the part of the listener, while the other, which is a natural process, does not. Number 2. Serious listening requires consideration of thought and it may be divided. A. Critical or discriminative listening. Critical or discriminative listening is first developed at a very early age, perhaps even before birth in the womb. This is the most basic form of listening and does not involve the understanding of the meaning of words or phrases, but merely the different sounds that are produced. So it means it starts when we were young, we listened to what others were saying, but we did not understand it. So it has 4 levels. A. Attentive listening is characterized with concentration of thought. B. Retentive listening retains knowledge. C. Reflective listening reflects on ideas heard. D. Retentive listening with a readiness to react. B. Social listening, which is it is our knowledge of how to interact with other people and even with our family, such as brother, sister, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, and etc. So, this may also classified into the following. Number 1, appreciative listening. Listening for pleasure. Number 2, conversational listening. Listening to maintain good relationships. 3, courteous listening. Means more than just being silent. So, let us proceed the levels of listening. In listening, likewise, there are 6 levels a listener may go through or prefer to settle with. So, they are as follows. Number 1, ignoring the speaker. Ignoring the speaker is communicating but the receiver who may be preoccupied with many other concerns completely denies or ignores him. So, when you see the ignoring the speaker means we don't care who speaks. So, number 2, pretending. The speaker is communicating while other party are at him blankly. This is the listening on the eye level for the sake of courtesy. So, when you see the pretending means the speaker is listening but just pretending. So, number 3, selective listening. The speaker is communicating but the other party chooses whatever she want to listen to. It may be a joke, an anecdote, or story in the middle of a speech. This is listening on the I and R levels. So, selective listening, meaning to say, we simply choose what you want to hear. Number 4, attentive listening. The listener looks at the speaker, hears his/her voice, and follows his/her thoughts with his/her mind. He concentrates on what he hears. This is listening with the eyes, the ears, the mind. So when you see the attentive listening, meaning to say the listener looks at the speaker. So number 5, sympathetic listening. Aside from seeing, hearing, and understanding the message, the affection cremation is involved. This is listening at the levels of the eyes, in the ears, the mind, the heart. So, when you see the sympathetic listening, which is the speaker is understood and placed in the listener's heart and mind. So, number 6, empathetic listening. This is the highest levels of listening. It involves the eyes, the ears, the mind, the heart in the action or the listener's active response or solution. It is not just on the PD level but on being in the actual situation of the speaker emphasis and listening. So, when you say the empathetic listening, meaning to say we understand in, for example, there is a problem and we respond to the speaker. So let us proceed the roadblocks listening. The following are some bad habits in listening that should be avoided. 1. Hostility to the speaker. This unfriendly attitude, which may spring from biases or prejudices, makes a listener disinterested and sends him or her criticizing the speaker in his/her delivery. So, when you say the hostility to the speaker, uh, means speaking incorrectly. Number 2, daydreaming as an internal barrier to the listener. This happens when the listener gets bored after long listening or when she is preoccupied with other things more interesting than the speaker in dreamlike fantasies. She tends to be a casual listener who tunes in when something said catches his/her fancy in whose mind and wonders of afterwards. So, when you say that the dreaming, which is hindi natin naiintindihan or not understood, means incomprehensible. Number 3, prejudging. Some listeners are given to making judgments even before listening. Things like the subject in uninteresting. The subject is not new or now it already dumped one's flair for listening. This jumping to a conclusion results in the wrong interpretation of the message and the belief that one listened effectively. So when you see the prejudging, meaning to say the listener give a comment but the speaker has not yet been able to speak. So, selective listening. A selective listener chooses channels she turns on and off whenever and wherever she pleases. Usually, she selects subjects that have something to do with him here. Those that she likes because they interest him here and shuts up to those that do not affect him here. She may also be evading a difficult subject. So, when you see the selective listening means pinipili lang ang speaker. Selects the speaker. So, number 5, close-mindedness. This occurs when the listener is overconfident, finds a dislike for the speaker or feels she knows better than the speaker. She believes in him here very much that she becomes non-receptive to the opinions and views of other others could be just being lazy to concentrate and absorb new ideas. So, when you see the close-mindedness, meaning to say you don't like the speaker or you don't like his topic. So, number 6, listener's background. It is cultures, beliefs, marks, biases, and prejudices can serve as obstruction to effective listening. So, when you see the listener's background, meaning to say, it is culture, belief, habit, and can serve as barriers to effective listening. Number 7, dis- distractions. This may come in varied forms like personal, interpersonal, physical, environmental, temporal, geographical, perceptual, or semantic. Noise, unfavorable setting in mannerisms, unpleasant voice. Physical appearance and language of the speaker are a few of the many things. So when you see the distractions, means you lose your mood because of what you see or hear around you. Like if we have a problem also. So, that's all. Thank you.